Hello, and welcome to Health and Fitness Redefined. I'm your host, Anthony Amen. Joining me today as we take a dive into the world of health and fitness, where we learn how to overcome adversity, debate fact versus fiction, and see health and fitness in a whole new light. Welcome, guys. Hope you're enjoying those quick tip episodes that we've been pushing out. If you have any topics that you would like me to personally discuss, to dive into a little more, something you just want 10 to 15 minutes of easily digestible information, please reach out. Health Fitness Redefined Podcast at gmail.com. That is Health Fitness Redefined Podcast at gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Today's episode, we're going to introduce a guy who's all involved in the boxing realm. He's got quite a few boxing gyms, so I think he knows what he's talking about. But I would love to really get his perspective about how those that are just even interested in getting involved in the field and aren't planning on going pro, but really want to use it for its health benefits. I think it's a great topic and something everyone should learn about. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Keith. Keith, it's an absolute pleasure to have you today.
Thank you for having me on, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Before we get into the nitty-gritty kind of stuff, I just want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the boxing world.
Yeah, so growing up, boxing was always in the background because my father being a professional boxing coach. And I was never really much into it. I was way more into art and music and whatnot. Growing up in Athens, Georgia, which is where REM and B-52s are from, if anyone knows those bands. And so anyway, then it wasn't until I was about maybe sixth grade I started having health challenges, started losing a lot of weight, started having joint issues. And actually first it was manifested cognitively with anxiety, depression, things like that. So we tried all these different types of treatments, went to psychiatrists and everything else, tried to see if I had any underlying disorders, couldn't find anything. Thank goodness for my mom. Finally, she got me a blood test. Turned out I had Lyme disease, which you get from ticks. And I had it for about 5 years undiagnosed. And during that time, I had dropped out of high school and everything else. And, had a pretty poor, obviously horrible health, but also horrible self-concept. So when I finally found an answer for it, at the time I was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes. I was smoking weed every day and drinking probably 3 or 4 days out of the week, almost like self-medicating. So I said to myself, like, man, do I want to be 30 or 35 like I am now and not have better health and have Lyme disease to blame for it and not actually take control of my health? So I went with my field of diamonds in my own backyard, which was my father being a boxing coach, and a fighter was the antithesis of everything that I was at that time, strong, resilient, in great shape, world-class shape. And so I fell in love with the sport, started getting into it. And then fortunately had to retire from the sport in 2010 when I was boxing in Mexico because of a neck injury, and then got into coaching.
Yeah, so you took it full circle. And Lyme disease is scary coming from somebody who's similarly than, if you don't live on the East Coast, maybe you don't have it around 20%, but there's literally ticks everywhere. So right. You're picking up like 4 or 5 a week off of you if you're out in the brush. But I personally have had it, but I got diagnosed pretty quickly. And nice. I don't remember much of it, but I was just told I was sick for a couple of days, went on some antibiotics, and that was it. I do know people who've gone undiagnosed like yourself, and it's scary. It can do permanent brain damage. People don't realize that.
Right.
Do you remember what the signs and symptoms were like throughout those 5 years of having it, or were you too young?
Oh, no. Yeah. So 6th grade on to 17, and then had symptoms onward during treatment because treatment was a long process. So like I said, first in severe anxiety and depression, so anxiety attacks, things like that, fatigue, massive fatigue, then a combination of insomnia and hypersomnia, right? So like not being able to sleep and then sleeping a bunch, then and nauseousness, then joint pain, muscle spasms, muscle twitching, facial spasms, things of that nature. And with it, I also had a lot of times with Lyme, Anthony, with being bit from ticks, you need to watch out for co-infections. So I had a blood parasite as well, along with that, which caused challenges as well. And and so it definitely caused some type of possible permanent damage, and especially going as long as I did. But yeah, so that's kind of the laundry list. But that's what makes it so hard to diagnose, because you can have a kid or adult or whoever, and they're just starting to feel tired and things like that. And you think, oh, maybe I just have the flu or something, or a cold. And it can lie dormant, from my understanding, up to 2 years after getting bit, and then express itself. And so, you don't even correlate it. And like, I never got a bullseye rash. So.
Yeah. And that's something that people kind of stereotypically look for. That's what I unfortunately ended up having, was a nice bullseye on my back, according to my mom. So she knew instantly that was it. But there's, like you said, it can lie dormant in your blood. And people don't realize that they're not going to do routine blood tests. It's not something you're just going to go into the doctor and be like, hey, test me for Lyme. They're going to say you need to at least wait 3 months after a bite to even go in and get blood work if you have signs and symptoms.
Right. That's right. That's right.
So it's pretty crazy thing. So kind of walk us through the beginning. I know you were talking about you went into boxing yourself. So what was that like from the first couple of days of really going to the gym with your dad and learning? Walk us through that process.
Yeah, so I started with a friend of mine. He and I both being trained by my father, because my father was kind of taking a hiatus for boxing for that time. Got kind of burned out with working with pros and things like that, because it's a very intensive process, and you work with a lot of crazy individuals and crazy situations. So yeah, so it started just training with him largely, and then my friend and I got pretty good together. But then the first moment we went to a gym with him to spar someone besides ourselves, we realized how much we sucked, right? Because we were looking pretty good together, because you get used to each other. But then the second you go against someone that you're not used to, even this person was smaller, weighed less, and didn't have that much more experience, but just beat the hell out of both my friend and I. And so it was a great experience because, as a young man, and I see this happen all the time with young men and young women, but also even people of older age that go into it more with the martial arts aspect of learning, the full art of it, is that it's such a great humbling process, right? And it's a true carving away of the ego, or a building of the character. And as you might know, the word character comes from the Greek word for chisel. So you're literally chiseling away at yourself. So, I used to think, even being at 125 pounds and super sickly, like, oh man, if it came down to it, I could fight someone, I could beat someone up. But then real quickly you learn, like, wow, like you're pretty inept. You can't do anything or much of anything. And so it's a great process of ripping away everything and your whole self-concept of that you can handle yourself, and then growing anew from that and realizing and building true confidence and competence.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I know it's a famous quote. I just don't know who said it. Getting punched in the face is the most humbling experience ever.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, like, yeah, whether it's punched in the face or punched in the body, right?
You just don't realize it till that happens. Personally, right. I'll be totally transparent. Never did any form of boxing ever before in my life. Never been punched in the face, never been in that kind of situation. But I can just kind of live vicariously through other people who've gone through the same experience. Did you have any issues with, I don't know how, I'm trying to think of how to word this properly, but when you started and being so sickly as you were, how many times were you telling yourself to give up, and what was the motivation not to give up?
Yeah, great question. Because so like I tell a lot of our fighters and clients, and just, people that are starting their health journey, or people that are actually competitors, man, I would go from one day. It was a very inconsistent type experience, because also when you start treating long-term Lyme disease, you can get something called the Herxheimer reaction, which is actually an exacerbation of symptoms when you start an antibiotic cycle. And so, so I would go from kind of getting some conditioning together, kind of clipping along a little bit. And then all of a sudden, bam, just like, my endurance just drops. So like one day I'd be able to spar a few rounds. Another day I wouldn't even be able to spar a round. Or with joints and things like that, those just getting ripped apart. And so, my father was a great boxing coach, and, he was, academically educated, being a PhD in neuroscience, but he was not well-rounded necessarily with the most up-to-date, exercise physiology and things like that. So when we trained hard all the time. There's never an easy day. Every punch was thrown with full power, everything else. And that can it will wreak havoc on someone's body, particularly coming from, my place that I was. And so, yeah, it was a very tough journey. And I remember the first time I even just like hit mitts in front of one of our family friends who's a world champion. Afterwards, I just cried, because I just felt so embarrassed, because I was tired as hell, and kind of just foggy, because that's one of the classic things with Lyme disease too, is it, impairs you mentally. And so my reaction time was slow as hell. And, I knew I could be better than that. But again, that's the whole process of it, is it's like, you have to know how much you suck in order to actually get better. And then, you get away all that ego. But it was just a very, very hard and painful journey. And that's where, there's other ways I could have gone about it and had more success. But because of that, that's why I'm able to relate to clients who are starting from zero, or less than zero almost,
And I think I know the answer already because of obviously we spoke a little pre-show, like similar circumstances, but do you feel like that humbling experience through learning to get back up through boxing has helped you in your actual career?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So one way that my father articulated to me first, which was, obviously it fed into the appeal of boxing, and it also helped motivate me to keep going with it. Well, one thing too is that he told me, maybe the last couple of years of me boxing, he said, Keith, if I would have went through everything you've gone through and struggles with this trying to do boxing, he's like, I would have quit a long time ago. So I really appreciate that coming from him because, he's someone that I really looked up to. And so, man, I lost your question. Give me that question.
It's okay. How do you feel like that journey's helped you in your business career?
So one way, like my father would say, that's what made me think of it, is that whenever he was getting nervous to give a presentation or, do anything, he would akin it to his fights he had. And he'd be like, well, this is way easier than getting punched in the face or beat up in front of a bunch of people. Right. And it's a very true thing because, in our modern world, thank goodness, most of the time we're not faced with physical harm and things like that. And, as males or even females, but particularly males, that's like the worst case scenario with any type of situation. And so being familiar with that and having to learn how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations has been very, very, very beneficial. And honestly, besides other things and maturity and whatnot, and also getting better, helped cure anxiety, helped with so many things. It truly gives you a full, broad picture of all of the wonderful and painful things in life more so. So therefore you can truly put things in proper perspective. But yeah, so having that fighter attitude and also finding out what you're made out of, right? So it's like, are you the type of person, or whatever person you decide to be, are you the type of person that when you get hit, actually, I remember I was talking to one of our Golden Glove champions. He just won regionals, Southeast regionals last weekend in Alabama. And on the way back, he was telling me about his first time sparring, which was back in 2020 with us. And he never got punched in the face either. And he said, he's like, I don't know if I'm one of those guys that just like cowers away or if I'm one of those guys that's going to be like fights. Right. And he found out that day, first day he sparred, that he's going to be one of the guys that fights. And with me, I wasn't automatically someone that was going to fight back. I was more so the type of person that would take it and not run away, but take it. So maybe that kind of stick to it type attitude. But yeah, it's interesting because that's kind of like an extra shade of it is that I would take a lot of punishment. I wouldn't necessarily like dealt it right back out. I wouldn't cower, but I would just, kind of I would kind of be like a rock a little bit. So I guess that was my attribute, but it's been an attribute with life and with business too.
I want to be that guy because the poster's right there, but tie it into a little bit of, I'm sure everyone listening has seen the Rocky movies, but that's kind of that same phenomenon, right? It's not giving it back. It was all about learning how to take it and just get up.
Right.
And that was kind of the moral of the first one, which was get beat down, get beat down, get beat down, pick yourself back up and just kind of take it again and then pick yourself back up again. And then it itself kind of relates to what you're talking about, building a character as far as who you are and learning not to just cower and give in to what life throws at you, but really learning to stand up and keep pushing back.
That's right. And also as well, the experience, I love this one. This one's from Jim Rohn, but, and I tell this to people all the time, and I told this to myself all the time, is that it's particularly with climbing with business, because that's where I had to do some of the most personal development. But I started my personal development journey when I started boxing. But it doesn't get easier, right? But you get better. And that's just something I always remind people of, remind myself of. It's never going to get easier. If anything, it actually gets harder. But in relevance to how good you are, you do get better. So therefore, it's, what was once hard is now easy to you, not because it's easier, but because you're better.
Yeah, I just want to tie this in to kind of leave it a little more of an important scenario for people. It's exactly what you said. Owning a business has been the hardest struggle as far as you really learn how to get better doing it. But as the bigger problems come, the bigger you get because the easier ones get solved quicker. So it relates to working out. And I think that's important. Whereas when you're working with a client or coaching them through boxing, that first session seems impossible, but it's really just the basics and the foundations. And every time you might say like, oh, it's still the same, but you don't realize the sessions are just getting harder.
Right.
So it might feel the same throughout, but if we went back to that very first session where you were dying, it would be a piece of cake for you at this point. But we're just constantly progressing as you start working out boxing. And it just relates perfectly into learning how to cope with a lot of different scenarios that life may throw at you.
That's right. Well, and something too is that, that the fostering, because I know you've seen it with clients, but just the fostering of the right mindset when someone approaches a challenge in exercise, because I know there's been plenty of times. Well, for instance, when I was 28, 29, I told my wife that I was never going to run more than 2 miles, and I've done like a few half marathons and And so, but one thing is that, like you're talking about, that grit of the boxing, it paid off with the running, because when my mind was set on hitting PRs and taking people out that were ahead of me, it helped feed that type of mindset. It gives you this little extra edge, which people cultivate a lot of different ways, but also gives you that edge in business too. And if left with, no choice, you can fight, flight, or freeze. And when you feel nervousness and things like that, that's actually excitement. I'm sure you've probably heard the research studies they did with public speaking, where they had one group of individuals try to tell themselves to relax, another group just tell themselves they're excited, and the group that just told themselves they're excited performed better, because at the end of the day, excitement and fear are actually the same thing. They're just, your body's priming itself for action, right? And so that's all it is.
I never put that together, but yeah. Like when I'm getting ready to go talk in front of a bunch of people, I'm getting pumped. I'm not sitting there going, breathe, Anthony. I'm like, no, let's go. Let's just do this.
That's right.
So I just get myself super psyched up, and it makes it so much better. And I can jump into a huge public speaking podcasting. Great example. I tell my entire audience, go back to episode 1 and look at the way that I was like trying to tell myself to relax. It's going to be okay. I botched the first 15 interviews. They're atrocious. They're so bad. But I realized I have to just get psyched and get excited to do it. And then it just, boom, it just comes, and the energy goes a long, long way.
Right.
I want to go, just before we go into our break, I just want to get a little bit about your professional career. And then after break, we'll hop into the audience and kind of give you guys an insight into how boxing may be able to just help you, even if you don't want to go that professional route. So tell us a little bit about your boxing career and how that has impacted your life.
Yeah, so my boxing career was largely non-existent. So I only had a few fights, and like I said, boxing in the United States and in Mexico. Spent a lot more time training than fighting, right? So a lot more time preparing, but not getting the the reward of fighting. So I'm proud to say, as a coach, that I've trained athletes who are far better than I ever was, and could beat the hell out of me at my best, which to me is what a good coach can do. And because also as well, the highest performing or best boxers or any athlete in history are not the best coaches. And so I've produced guys who have from scratch gone from 0 to undefeated professional records, guys who have fought on Showtime, ESPN, and whatnot. And about every year we produce at least a state Golden Glove champion, if not more. And so, yeah, taking people from that 0, I really found that one of my real hard niches is we're really good at, I say we because of our systems, which I've, kind of distilled everything into our systems, but taking people from 0 to whatever level they want to get to maybe an intermediate pro level.
Yeah. So that's so important, is really getting people to the next level, what they can and can't accomplish. And I loved what you said. The best coaches aren't the best athletes, because that is so freaking true. I'll even throw another caveat. The best athletes are the worst coaches.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I've seen that time and time again. People are looking around and be like, I want the guy who's the most athletic. I was like, yeah, but it doesn't mean he knows what he's talking about.
Right.
And also, coach.
Yeah. And to fully nuance it out, because I used to be really extreme on this opinion, but to fully nuance it out, to fully draw it all out, it's those guys and gals, they can give you tips. They can give you perspectives, But as far as actually being that coach, because also what I can into as well, Anthony, is that the job to be a great athlete is the job to be very selfish. The job to be a coach is you have to be pretty unselfish. And so I've seen that a lot with some of the guys I've tried to transition from moderately successful boxing careers, or let's say more successful boxing careers than I had. And they go into attempting to coach, but they still have that mindset of a fighter and whatnot. And it's still me, 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 me. And it's like, dude, it doesn't work. Like, you can't prioritize, yourself. You need to be able to give yourself at least that moment that you're with that person fully to that person.
Yeah, you nailed it right on the head. That's exactly it. To be a great athlete, you have to be selfish. To be a great coach, you have to be selfless. That is the best way I've ever heard it done. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Thomas.
Appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break from word from our sponsor, guys, and we will be right back and kind of hop into that. Hey, I'm kind of thinking about getting into boxing, but I don't want to get punched in the face kind of phenomenon. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. For us, we know what it's like to feel unhealthy, depressed, and downright defeated. We want to show others there is a right way, and through fitness, you can do anything you set your mind to. Fitness can give you that motivation, confidence, energy you need to bridge that mental gap and prevent you from missing important life events. We understand it's about feeling better, living longer, and being good examples for our kids. We understand this because we live it. And for us, that's the redefined difference. Hey everybody, and welcome back. We got Keith here. We're talking all about the boxing world. And Keith, I just kind of want to ask you and talk to these people directly if you could. Thinking about getting started. I'm not sure if boxing is something I want to do. What would you say to me?
Yeah, well, one thing is that similar to, like, I have a 6-year-old daughter. So her saying, like, well, I don't like that food. It's like, well, have you ever tried that food? No. So how do you know you like it or you don't like it, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, once someone gets past that mindset of defining themselves and what they do and don't do, is realizing that if they were ever any form of athlete, whether it was in high school or college or just whatever, boxing allows you a way to individually still train like an athlete, right? Because you're still working in dynamic movement patterns. You're working on coordination. There's so much supporting data. For instance, there's this one research study I read the other day that said that high school athletes that did boxing training for 8 weeks increased their hand-eye coordination by, I think it was 21 or 24%.
Wow.
So it's just, there's so much more benefit to this type of training on just your mobility, reaction, and hand-eye side. Then you go over to the actual physiological side with, obviously high intensity interval style training, which is what boxing really is. A beautiful mixture of aerobic and anaerobic energy systems. So often guys, particularly when you get a little bit older, but even in general, even young dudes, they are like, I'm going to smash heavy weights. That's all I'm going to do. They do no type of conditioning or cardio. With ladies, they'll tend to lean on the cardio side, just cardio. And where boxing truly gives you the best of all worlds, along with the actual deep confidence you get from learning a skill. It's amazing. I tell a story about one of our coaches, Maura. She was, I think, 30 years old when she first started training with us. And she ended up getting to the point after training for a few years. She was like, oh, well, I want to maybe do a fight. So she did a fight, ended up doing about 5 fights, won a city title in Atlanta, and then, said, I'm done. But in that journey of her obviously getting in the best shape of her life, mastering so many disciplines about herself, I saw her literally change as a person and how she held herself. I remember one time seeing someone walk from the parking lot. I was like, who the hell is that? And it was Maura, but it looked like a different person, just how they held themselves. And people pick up on those telltale signs. And so it's not only like you look in amazing shape, you can look at amazing shape, but how you hold yourself, conduct yourself, and everything else just spews lack of confidence or spews uncertainty. But you can, just look fairly normal or just in great shape, but have a different air about you. And that's what I find boxing training does for so many.
Yeah, I feel like we were talking about just the back in the beginning, building character and just building self-confidence goes a long way when it comes to a humbling experience like boxing training. And just from, like I said, people I've talked to, it changes a person, but in a good way. And
Right.
it really brings out good characteristics of an individual and teaches them a lot about self-confidence, which plays a role in every aspect of your life. Having better self-confidence is going to help you financially, is going to help your relationships. It's just a lot more of an aspect than just getting in shape. Another thing you touched on was a balance of anaerobic and aerobic. For those that don't know what that means, just with or without oxygen, depending on what kind of training, like cardio is aerobic, for example. But HIIT training is that blend in between both of them. And as we've talked about numerous times in the show, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, it's the best way to lose weight. Period.
That's right. Right.
Keith doesn't know this, and some of my audience doesn't know this, but I actually published a medical paper on it. So
wow.
It is by far, according to a meta-analysis study, the most effective way to lose weight, period.
That's awesome. Well, and also just kind of going into some of the nuances as well with boxing training, because that's such a good point. But something like these bags, right? Like something as dumb as that, because it's a thing full of, recycled material. What's interesting as well is that when you hit a bag, so it's not only the exertion that you put out on the bag, but actually being able to tense the muscles on contact to the point that it is able to hold up to your mass times acceleration. All right. So, like, how much do you weigh, Anthony?
Let's say 200.
Oh, wow, you're a big guy. So 200. When you freaking hit a bag and put your body weight behind the punch, you throw that punch maybe 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, whatever, man, that is a lot of force that is getting put on your muscles, your bones, and it helps so much for bone density and strength. And I've seen people build muscles, obviously, this stuff. I'm gonna say this for the general audience, not bodybuilder muscles, but the ripped, strong back muscles and everything else that is so hard to train in just standard weightlifting oftentimes. And you don't really get it unless you do some of these more dynamic movements. But I've seen so many people gain strength, gain all of these attributes from something as simple as like hitting a bag and knowing how to put the body weight with it. They really get an isometric contraction that's hundreds of pounds on their body. So it's amazing all the different little nuances and how boxing is beneficial. Also, last thing I'll say too, is it's actually like, let's contrast the two of kickboxing and boxing. Okay. So both very similar, right? So very, very similar. But my side is that I think, and my wife as well, my wife fought 22 fights, 16 of those were Muay Thai kickboxing, 4 of those were MMA, and 2 of those were boxing. So she has experience with the whole buffet. But that kickboxing training is great. It's awesome and wonderful sports, Muay Thai, things like that. But it can have a limited or people can be limited in how much they can do it or with different backgrounds and whatnot, because you are going up on one leg, which is automatically going to be a little bit more dangerous for certain populations. You have simply the stress on the lower back of lifting that hip up and that leg up as high as you do sometimes. And also hitting a bag, you can use shin pads and things like that, but hitting, using your shins to hit stuff and whatnot, versus with boxing, you have wraps that have a lot of pad on it. You have a glove and things like that. And so it can cause, some different challenges. Whereas boxing training is really awesome because it can suit a lot of different population sets. Everything from, I know, you being up north, about Parkinson's boxing and everything else. And we do that down here as well. So everything from someone with Parkinson's disease that's, struggling with a neurological decline to young folks. And yeah, it's amazing. I had a DEXA scan done and my skeletal, my bones weigh probably as much as someone that's about 220 pounds. Can't remember the exact poundage, but, I have very heavy bones for someone that's only about 175 pounds. And I like to think it's because of all of that, boxing work, hitting things. And the last thing I'll say real quick is that are you right-handed or left-handed there, Anthony?
Righty.
So if you were to start doing boxing training, you would find, obviously, since you do weight training and things like that, you're pretty evened out, right? But what's so cool about boxing, like people talk about different ways to challenge yourself mentally. You'll brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand or the hand you don't normally use to do it with and whatnot. With boxing, primarily most of all your actions are done with your non-dominant hand. So if you're righty, you're going to put your left foot forward, your left arm forward. Your left arm is going to do a lot of work with the jab, throwing the most important punch in boxing, and it's going to be used to set up right hands and things like that. And so you just get all this development. It's like with me, for instance, with like I'm right-handed, but with like as far as like muscularity and bone density, my left arm is a lot more than my right, and my right leg is a lot more than my left from simply just pushing off the back leg and using the jab so much in the left hook.
You went into like 15 different types of things, so I'm going to pick a couple that kind of stood out. I want to start with a funny example because I think this is the best way for everyone. If you're driving, please don't do this. But if you are not driving, I just want everyone to do a simple example, and Keith, you can do it with me on screen. It's really easy.
Yeah.
I just want you to take your right hand and put your finger straight out like this, and then your left hand, so both fingers are facing towards each other. Mm-hmm. Now this is the challenge. One of them has to rotate one way, and the other has to rotate the opposite way.
Yeah.
And do it together simultaneously. So opposite. One goes clockwise, one goes counterclockwise. You're thinking. You've almost got it. There you go.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of doing this? The purpose of doing this is showing your muscular control between two different sides of your body, how you control your right and your left hand. I played drums for 12 years. I've never seen a drummer that couldn't do it. So I wasn't good, but I played for 12 years. So I learned quickly how to use my left arm separate from my right hand, kind of like that brushing teeth example. But boxing sets that same exact kind of standard. It teaches you how to use both sides of your body. Another easy way to tell if you're super dominant is when be conscious of how you walk up a set of stairs. I see 9 times out of 10, people always lead with their dominant side constantly. Over time and over many years, you're going to super build up that one leg, even though the steps seem so small at first, and then super not build up the other side. And then you're going to have hip issues because now one side is bigger than the other, and you're going to have a huge imbalance. And you're going to be like, damn, why does my left hip hurt? Well, stop leading with your right leg. That would be an easy. Be conscious. Try switching it up. Lead with that non-dominant leg. But that's kind of an important tidbit that people really don't think about is, do I have the neuromuscular control to work on both sides? Another really important topic is, I think this is probably the most important thing out of everything you said, is just functionality purposes. Is what you're doing going to benefit you throughout your day? Like, what's your goal, right? When you come to the gym and to either coaching or to us, we ask, what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish out of this? Most people don't want to be professional athletes. They don't want to be bodybuilders. They don't want to be into powerlifting. They just want to feel better. And they just want to live longer. And doing exercises that are similar, and I see it a lot more than you do, but they go into that bodybuilding workout where it's, okay, I'm going to do bicep curls. Great. It's fun. But what does that do for you throughout the day? I'm going to say nothing. Maybe you can drink beer better, but that's about it. To us, and I know to you after going with what you said, it's we take things you would do throughout your day and make it an exercise. Like one of my favorite is a hip step over. I'm going to put a bench and I'm going to have you go standing vertically to it from one side over to the other. The step over the bench. This is teaching you how to balance on one leg. This is teaching you how to hip flex and lifting your knee up. This is working on ankle stabilization and hip stabilization. And it's teaching you how to move your body in space so you don't trip over a bench and fall. Or when, as an example, walking outside and tripping over a curb. So different things like that are going to challenge your brain a lot more. We talked about this in a previous episode, but a simple way to say, hey, Anthony, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, is I want you to do a simple math problem while working out. Do a squat and then try to do like 10 times 9. If that's not like really easy for you, and you'll realize how much more you struggle and how much more you sweat and how much more your heart elevates just from your brain's trying to multitask, think of both things. And it's like, wait, stop. And it's so much better for you mentally and cognitively, especially as you age. It's been shown to be the best thing for those that age to help prevent cognitive decline. So really important stuff. And I know that was a lot, but you have any takeaway from that one? Or both those things I said?
Yeah, well, one thing is, for instance, on the balance side of things, you can probably say this stat better than I can, but when people get older, right, one of the largest reasons they go to the hospital is falling, isn't it?
By far.
Yeah. And so what I saw with, for instance, our older population, we have a very vibrant boxing park Parkinson's program at our Athens location, and so many people, so many kids of the people in there, and so many of them, they were falling down like once a month, right? And now they start boxing with us, and they stopped falling down, and they have a illness that technically should keep them declining, but the declining doesn't, it's slowed down. So obviously the illness of age, but the illness of Parkinson's as well. And then on that note as well, just with that population set of being able to we go through the alphabet and things like that of name all the towns or cities that start with A, or all the ones that start with B, and just go through a list and things like that to just get yourself cognitively active. And then also as well, that's where, like you were just touching on, just natively to boxing training, you are working on, so like proprioception, right? Big one. So many folks that, throughout your day, what do? You raise one hand and you drop another to counterbalance yourself as you walk, right? And so simply like similar to your thing you're talking about with the opposite moving of the fingers, that it's, man, you have to be able to move things independently of another. You can't put out a punch and drop your other hand. Simple stuff like that anyone could tell you, but it takes a lot of coordination. And I see so many people from so many different backgrounds and people that are frankly in really good shape that don't have that physical awareness initially. And that's where stuff like boxing and other coordinated activities like that really build that.
Yeah, simple proprioception test. Stand on one leg and close your eyes. I bet you 99% of you can't do it. That's right. Because you're not trained well enough to know that you can balance without using your visual feedback system, aka your eyes. Right. But it's important, especially in a sport like boxing or swinging a bat like in baseball. If I just had to stare at the ball the entire way and I couldn't take my eyes off of it, it'd be very hard to hit a home run.
Right.
Or if to stare at my feet and be like, all right, make sure my feet are in the right place. So when I swing, I know I'm balanced. No, I have to be looking at so many other things.
Right.
So really, really super important. Keith, I just kind of want to bring this all together real quick and summarize it. So just in your words, I'm going to change my last question a little bit, but in your words, can you kind of give us an insight about why you think it's important for those that don't do anything right now or have thought about getting into just some kind of formal boxing training to get started as soon as possible, but just try to keep that in like a couple sentences?
Yeah. Well, most people, the reason they don't stick with something is about maybe two reasons, right? And that's one is accountability and the other one is enjoyability, right? So there's a lot of things you can do that are effective, but you need to find what flavor it is that you really like. Some people fall in love with running. Some people fall in love with yoga and things like that. And if you haven't fallen in love with something yet, or even if you have fallen in love with something, the decline of the expert is when you do something and only something for the rest of your life. And then therefore you have very low activity of everything else and imbalances. So with anyone that reaches out to us, for instance, we know how important it is for them to, one, have that accountability, but two, to do something that's engaging, that's actually going to, little do you know, it's going to add more quality to your life. And what death is simply less movement, right? So if you move less, that's closer to death. If you move more, you're closer to life. And so if you're not moving as much as you want to now, realize it's simply, you just need to change it. And it's going to take little steps to do that, but it took you little micro steps to get to where you are now, and it'll take that to get you out of it.
I love that. And the second question, just how can people find you, get a hold of you, give you all the good stuff?
Yeah. So they look at our website, keppnerboxing.com. We have a pretty cool YouTube channel with a good amount of subscribers. We have a lot of boxing information there, which is, pretty palatable and enjoyable. And those would be probably the two best ways to kind of look us up and check us out.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on, Keith. And thank you guys for listening and joining us in this week's episode of Health and Fitness Redefined. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button and join us next week as we dive deeper into this ever-changing field. And remember, fitness is medicine. Until next time.